everyone. I'm Dr. Neka. Welcome to our new series of community conversations. We are centering the Black perspective on redefining Black futures. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe for notifications. If you've already subscribed, we genuinely appreciate you. So listen, I need your help. We have some phenomenal folks with us. So please share the videos with the Oakland community and anyone concerned about what's happening in Oakland. Now let's get into the video.
My name is Thalia Kelly and I'm from the Bay Area.
Well, welcome, Thalia. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. I just want to start off talking about your educational experience. So my first question is, how well do you believe your K-12 and college education prepared you for where you are now?
Well, I'd say my jumping around in different schools in different areas, I guess, shows that the Oakland Unified School District or the school districts in the Bay Area didn't prepare me as much as I would like them to. And I think my parents saw that as well. So I started off at a kindergarten, a Catholic school called St. Bede's. And it wasn't a really healthy environment for me as a young Black girl. And so my parents saw all those things. And then I transferred over to another school, which was not a healthy environment for me as a young Black girl and didn't give me the rigor that I needed to prepare for college. And so all this jumping around then led me to actually going down a different direction, which was a all-white school in Orinda. So I'd say altogether, academically, the resources in Oakland and then other cities in the Bay Area did not prepare me academically, and was not safe because a lot of the educators were white women that did not know how to handle teaching Black children in different voices. And then going to the white school had the academics, had the resources, had all the things I needed to prepare, but I was not given the care or attention that I needed to thrive in that environment.
Having had these experiences with issues of psychological safety, what changes would you like to see for the next generation?
I'd like to see more representation. I'd say more representation and also more background checks, because I do feel like there are a lot of teachers in different areas that are not meant to teach children. So there needs to be more of a structure of making sure that people are qualified to teach children and teach children of different voices and races and backgrounds. But I'd also say I think funding in education, funding and making sure that teachers are paid enough so that they care about the things that they are doing and the ways that they're teaching their students is really important. So I'd say the main two things are representation, making sure that you're getting students or getting teachers that look like their students, or getting teachers that are willing to be open to teaching so many different races. And
well, how do you see the current educational system supporting or hindering economic opportunities for Black students with this understanding?
Yeah, I think funding is a huge part, because if nobody is being taken care of in terms of resources, how is anybody going to care? And it's just a big mess. I think the way that the government structure in itself economically takes away from a lot of these urban schools in itself, and the lack of resources is a huge problem. Economically, there needs to be a strong funding in urban areas, because I do think when I was going to that all-white school, it was the fact that it was a white school that they were willing to give resources to those students. Yeah. So I think economically the funding, I don't even know where to start in terms of like policy and how that would work.
I think that's great, because you're repeating the importance of funding and the need to remember and own the fact that urban education is severely underfunded, and the fact that it needs to become more of a priority.
Yeah.
In what ways do you believe your K-12 education experience prepared you for, now that you're out here and you're a college graduate, what ways did it prepare you, and what ways did it lack preparation?
I think the struggles that I had through my K to 12 experience definitely taught me like the grit and drive and being resilient in situations through the workforce. I think that's a huge thing. I can't say academically I was fully prepared, but I do think being put in an environment where I was
Mhm.
either mistreated or wasn't given the resources taught me how to survive
Mm.
in those areas. Um, so I think that's a major thing, just learning resilience, learning to keep my head up, learning to move
Mm.
forward in situations and continue to fight through that. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. But on a different note, I will say that in the high school experiences that I had, I did learn
Mhm.
the basic foundations of how to um, be academically strategic, if that makes sense. Like learn how to
Mm.
study, learn how to organize, learn how to manage my time. All those things I think definitely helped. But I'd say the big thing is just pushing forward resilience and learning how to adapt in an environment that doesn't necessarily look like me.
You're a college graduate now. You're
Mhm.
out here, and what's your major?
Economics.
Economics. You're an economics major, so you have a degree in econ. What strategies or resources do you believe are essential for folks who perhaps may have graduated and they're still seeking employment? What strategies and resources do you believe are essential to help them, people like that, overcome? They're college graduates, they're still seeking employment, and not quite acquiring the job opportunities that are aligned with their degrees. What might help them overcome, or someone like you overcome, barriers to economic mobility? So what we're talking about right now is underemployment. So for
Mhm.
someone who has earned a college degree and they weren't able to acquire a job in their particular field of study and
Mhm.
had to settle for employment for the sake of employment, what would
Mhm.
be helpful?
As somebody in that position and still trying to figure it out, I do think the things that have helped me is reaching out, connecting with people, um,
Mhm.
not stopping that push and move forward and looking for work because it is it feels like a never ending feeling of discouragement. Like I feel like I'm constantly discouraged in the space of either getting rejections or not getting any response at all. So I will say the one thing that helped me feel, or that is helping me feel like I'm moving forward in that, is reaching
Mhm.
out, connecting with the people, especially your college network, connecting with
Yes.
other students or other undergrad or postgrad that
Mhm.
are in the same position. I think just communicating, finding community, and
Mhm.
just reaching out to people because I felt like those barriers were lifting up a bit once I used my voice and said, "Hey, I'm having this problem, and
Okay.
what can I do? What other ways can I view this? How can I navigate this situation?" So definitely reaching out to people and networking and putting yourself out there and not being afraid to put out your skills, put out your voice in anything that will help people understand that you deserve to be in these spaces.
How can folks from, or how can millennials and folks from Gen X and the baby boomers, there's some of them are still in leadership positions
Mhm.
and they're holding space in these leadership roles. How can they help bridge these gaps? So if you're able to sit down with a group of folks from these that represent these different generations,
Mhm.
what would you like to tell them about the needs to,
Mhm.
in order to help bridge these gaps? What would you need from folks from these different generations?
Yeah. I think what I am noticing a trend of is a lot of people's judgment of millennials and Gen Z
Mm.
and not them seeing us navigate in a very social media world and that's them feeling like that's our only lens through life. Um, I really do
Mm.
think maybe like we're fully capable of the work that you think that we're not capable of. I think we're ready. I think if
Mm.
anything, we're more than
Okay.
ready. So just have faith in us, have trust that we can get the
Mm.
job done and that we're not. I think we're fully capable because I know that I've seen some things where or read articles where people are afraid to hire Gen Z and millennials because of our sensitivity level or our lack of work ethic or just social media as a whole. And I really do think that there are some truths to that, but I do feel like you have to give us a chance to at least prove that we are capable of doing the work that you want us to do. So I think just understanding more so, because I think I'm still trying to figure out like, well, we have to start somewhere. So just like giving us the chance to do that and prove ourselves.
If you had an opportunity to say anything to those who are in positions of who hold positions that could shift the tide,
Mhm.
what would you want to say?
I would like them to know that as somebody who has been in many tough situations and has felt small in many, many ways, um, that I did not stop and I am here and I am willing to continue to move forward and push forward and fight for the resources that I know that I am entitled to and deserve. And I will continue to fight for the so many other Black women and Black people and people of color that deserve to be in these spaces and work for the mission and goal of society. I think, especially politically, when we see what's going on today, I think we all are hoping for a greater, just a greater society, a society where we could all feel equity, we could
Yes.
all feel power and importance and understand that our lives can coexist and we could all still get the resources that we need. In regards to the people in my position or young Black women who are having a hard time finding a job, I'd say that honestly, like, just give us a chance. Like, we're here, we want our voices heard, and I think we want to continue to move forward to make sure that we can fight and be in these positions and also gain economic stability and wealth for our future
Yes.
generation of Black people in the community. So thank you so much for allowing me to use my voice and speak about this issue that I think is hitting so many people in so many different generations.
That is my mission, is around like helping to create hope in our communities, because I think that there are a lot of resources that are available, but if folks don't know how to access them, nothing changes, right? So to your question, I think that, I think that millennials, I think we're a unique bunch because we've been able to live through a lot, right? We lived before there was genuinely technology, and then we came into the age of technology, right? And so ultimately, I think a lot of millennials, actually in this moment, I think that a lot of millennials are stepping up and saying, hey, you know what? Nothing has changed from the last decade, and maybe it's our time to kind of try to come together and help create solutions to a lot of these longstanding kind of issues. And so I think that here locally, there's a lot of young millennials that are stepping up and into leadership roles, and we uh, we are, I think we've been able to kind of live life in a way where we're I think our mindset is very inclusive. How can we bring everyone together and reach this common goal? And so I know that that's something that I naturally do. I just we just had an event with the office that I led, kind of similar to when I reached out to Cheryl saying, hey, you know what, here's this I want to make sure that the community, watches your documentary. And so I reached out to local schools in East Oakland and partnered with the Native American Health Clinic, and we did vision exams yesterday. We serviced 75 community members and seniors and young people. And this was a partnership that brought together a vision provider, a health clinic, and our office. And so I think that one of the best ways that millennials are able to really rally is through our natural kind of activism and bringing all of the partners together, bringing everyone together. I think it's just something that we do naturally. And so I guess to kind of answer the question, the charge is just to keep, keep going, right? I think the moment is now. And we have to work really hard to ensure, like, to help create hope for the future, because it's there. And if I had to say honestly, I genuinely really believe that in the next, maybe give us 5 years, that in the next 5 years we can really help create change together. That's another thing that I like to emphasize, that because you don't get far alone, and so you got to bring everyone together in order to create positive change for the community.
Thank you, Rowena.
I have a question, if that's
Okay, all right.
Before you leave, Rowena, I had a follow-up question.
Yes.
So I appreciate your willingness to share who you are, what you believe, and what you stand for in this conversation today. So as a revered public servant, how do you ensure that you stay true to your personal ideals of public service?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be like very rooted in who you are, right? And I think that that's something that really, in truth, is probably established early on.
Okay.
Right. And so it's based on your values, right? Values of integrity, values of, trust, like being, of integrity, values related to just kind of is this going to be in the best interest of the community that you are representing?
Okay.
Right. And so, and I think it's also a matter of you also got to constantly check in with yourself, right? That's something that I naturally do. Like after a long week of like, hey, how did this go? And there should be alarm bells that actually naturally go off too. Because sometimes I'll be in situations and I'm like, and it'll just naturally kind of go off, and I'm like, all right, this may not be my group.
Okay.
And that's okay, right? And being able to kind of walk away from that situation and say, hey, you know what? You can't win them all, and that's all right. Because I know that I'm staying true to who I am, right? And why I'm stepping up to serve. And at the end of the day, I think when you're in tune with yourself, your body tells you also if something is not in alignment. Right. And so I really kind of stay in tune in that manner. And then also, just my upbringing very anchored in faith. And so that definitely is what is that, like a roadmap that keeps me really guided.
Thank you so much for answering this question. We rarely get a chance to hear public servants speak so personal like this. And thank you for your transparency.
If there was any kind of last things that I would uplift, for everyone who lives in Oakland, this election cycle is definitely, I mean, we always say it, but this election cycle is really important.
Yes.
It's actually an opportunity to shift a lot of the dynamics on our Oakland City Council in a more positive way, right? With folks who actually want to work well together. So please, in the various kind of groups that you are a part, drop it on people's radar, make sure that they have all the tools that they need as far as like what's on their ballot. There's a handful of different events. I'll send it to you. There's a handful of events that are focused in on actual voter education without the candidates, right? How do you look up and see who's on your ballot, et cetera? So I'm always, that's actually something that I'm really passionate about as a former civics education teacher. and is ensuring that folks, really know, like, how do they fill out the ballot effectively. So that'll probably be my last little kind of parting statement of, like, let's tap in. Of course, everyone's excited about voting for our next president, but we have to remember that what's happening locally and even at the state level impacts our lives here. And so we really need to be dialed into the decisions that we are about to make in November.
Yes, and yes, please, as soon as you get those to me, we'll make sure that we circulate whatever resources you give us. And
Okay.
Cheryl's going to talk to us more about how we can tap in. So Cheryl, I want to bring the conversation back to you. Do you believe that because we're having this intergenerational conversation, and so my question to you is, do you believe that there are lessons that we can learn from the past that could be applied in some way to address some of today's housing issues in Oakland?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to my mind, at 17, I was kind of pushed out of the home, sent to Nashville to go to school. But before I went to school, I was sent to Mississippi as part of SNCC. I did kind of a summer training. I came back and then I started school. So I say all of that to first of all say, kids have always been at the forefront of movements, but those kids aren't standing by themselves. Their families and their communities are behind them. So one thing that I hear a lot when you're talking intergenerationally is that younger people might think, well, we're in such bad shape. Like the generations before us didn't do anything. They weren't successful. And I really think we have to reframe that and let folks understand that this is cyclical. This idea of I want my share and you can't have your share, it comes up over and over again throughout history. It does. This fight will never end, probably. And I think part of what we have to do is prepare a next generation for that. Then we have to stand with them and behind them, knowing that, sometimes I'm shocked at how much I don't understand about what my own kids are going through, right? I certainly can't even envision what my grandkids are going through, but I have to be prepared to hear it and stand with it and propel them on, give them the same kind of hope and optimism that folks gave me. And, I'm a little bit younger than like the 1965 SNCC and all of that stuff, but we saw enough that from then on, there's no other way I could live. That's one thing. The other thing, though, is that it strikes me when I was listening to the Reverend in Nashville and SNCC and in the South generally, just like families and communities put their children out there to move forward, churches open their doors. And they open their doors to people who had different ideas from them. To me, and I'm not a churchgoer, I've said that like frequently, but there can be a struggle with kind of class stuff with Black churches. But even with that in Nashville, my experience was that we did most of our organizing for SNCC in churches. That's where, and you might have to push at the minister a little bit, but eventually the door opened, you came in and you did your presentation and you went on about things. I think that that's important. Oakland breaks my heart. East Oakland breaks my heart because there is a church on every corner. Well, if there's a church on every corner, there should be so much goodness abound that like we're just swimming in it. And that's not true. And I take my film, a lot of times churches are who's showing the film, and it's fine with me, but they haven't been doing it out here in East Oakland, which I really find, well, the word despicable almost jumped out of my mouth. So I'm gonna pull that back in. But it's hard because I know that if nothing else, they should be the bedrock of our communities. They've used up all the property. So like you're saying, do that other role. So I wanted to start with that. This is an ongoing struggle that will always go on because since the beginning of time, Somebody felt like they had the privilege, and in order to have it, they needed to deny it from other folks. So we're going to always be struggling with that. That's one thing. Okay, now I've gotten so swept away with that. Ask your question.
You can just naturally keep going. We're really just talking about the lessons that we can learn. And what you've already said, I think, is impactful, because it is important for us to help young people understand the connection between what happened before and the fact that we can learn from those movements. I know Reverend Davis Wiles, we talked about the 10-point plan and the ways in which we can look at these different social movements and what can we learn from those that we can carry forward and share with the next generation. Because you are absolutely right. What a lot of young people don't know or weren't taught is the fact that young people were at the forefront of these movements. So I'll pause there.
But let me say again, while young people were at the forefront, when I think about myself, I had courage, but I didn't have a lot of, I was missing a lot. But there
Right.
were adults in our lives that fed us enough to keep us moving forward and not making really huge mistakes, like, some mistakes. The other thing that I really want to say, having been in SNCC in the South at the time that the Panthers, I always have to kind of reorient myself because I miss that. I did, but my mother was one of their teachers at Grove Street Merritt. But I have to rethink that. When we worked in Nashville around SNCC, we went all over the country, not so much the West Coast, but all over the country. So I saw a lot. And I have a problem with Oakland thinking that the Black Panthers is where it started here, because they're not. They're one of many movements, and the fact that we had so many groups rubbing up against each other, I think made it well, first of all, there was more opportunity for a lot of divergent thought, but also it made it a more robust period where we all had some place to fit, right? And even, and also I want to remind us that there were Black folks who weren't having none of it. I like a more holistic view than often we come out with. An honest and open, holistic view, because as a people, the truth is that we're from many states. That brings us from many cultures, right? Just being from Alabama isn't just a place you're from, right? You come with a culture. Louisiana, like I can say, ooh, you got some Louisiana in you, don't you? Right? All of those little nuances are important as we look at the place we're in right now. And in that same way, when I think about, like, I'm trying to figure out these pronoun things, when I think about the things that young people have on top of their mind, they're things that I never would have thought. Like, I'm still trying to learn English the way they were trying to teach me at Parker. They're like undoing my whole thing. I've been working at it for 70 years and they're trying to undo the whole thing. But I have to hear it and I have to do the work of figuring it out so that when my grandkids are the ones that are going out there, I know where to stand. I don't know. I think that's just, and I don't see that range of understanding. And also remembering that we are a people who've got class issues, we've got color issues, we've got all kinds of stuff going on. And we know that, so let's stand in it and try and correct as much of it as possible, at least, model what our ideas of correction are, because it's in what we do that we transform to the next generation what they ought to at least be thinking about.
Wow. Reverend Davis Wiles, how can the church play a role in cultivating these intergenerational conversations that can foster healing foster healing in the Black community so that we can learn from each other?
I think I have a couple of things. As I was listening, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that. It caused me to think about a couple of things. I'm always thinking about, we're living in a socially charged climate where everybody is working really hard to be politically correct. And I want to push back against that a little bit, because if me being politically correct to make someone else comfortable means violating and or laying down parts of me that I find essential, we're going to have a problem. So I think that the church in particular has to start with some identity stuff of its own, and understanding what it's truly called to in terms of being a center and a base. We have to lift up conflict, and we have to open a space for conflict. We avoid it like the plague, and it is the one thing we can absolutely expect, is that conflict is a part of life, and it's how we grow. And so I want to invite this idea of being despicable. I think was that despicable. Let's stop having nice, nasty conversations. Let's talk about the nasty stuff, right? Because the more we move away from the pain and the anger and the hurt and the disappointment, we are having superficial conversations.
Yeah.
And the church has got to stop doing that. Let's stop trying to make everybody comfortable, and let's do this. Can we just talk about our pain and disappointment for a minute? And let's do it with a strategic plan to work through it. We don't have to stay stuck there.
Yeah.
So at our panel in the summer, I love the fact that the Black Psychological Association president and VP were in the room, because as much as a practitioner, I'm a clinician by trade, I love the idea of talking about our cultural nuances associated with diagnosis, right? Like we talk about social psychological challenges that may impact and or initiate diagnosis, anxiety, depression, oppositional. And side note, I'm okay with oppositional diagnosis because I was oppositional defiant on purpose most of my life, adolescence in particular. And it's how I navigated the world. And it's what I needed to do to make sense out of what was happening socially, but what wasn't being named. Yeah. And I see so many young people acting out rather than verbalizing, because that's what we respond to. We respond to temper tantrums and destructive behavior more than we do verbalizing what is happening, because people ignore it, right? So we have this collective deafness is what I call it. It's deaf, as if we don't hear, but we see it. And the minute we see something, then we want to say something, but we compartmentalize our conversations. And so the role of the church in helping to create a space, intergenerational, first we have to welcome whosoever. That was a Jesus thing, not a me thing, right? So whosoever means you stop trying to talk about sacred and secular when we're just talking about natural dynamics. Jesus said first to the natural, then to the spiritual. We can talk about spirit second, but let's talk about this thing that's plaguing us so deeply that we can't tolerate being in a room together. And I don't teach tolerance because it's a Band-Aid. So I feel like if we're going to start at a place of recognition, let's recognize the ailments that's causing a division. We will invite some people, but not everybody. That's the problem. When really we say we want to reach everybody, but we're selective about who we bring into the space. Sister Cheryl, you were talking about kind of learning how to speak, or what the vernacular is maybe of the day. And I'm blessed to have millennials and Gen Z. I have 2 generations and groups of kids, and I'm tickled. I'm like, you guys didn't make that up. That's not new. And so I thank you for holding up just kind of young people being in the forefront, but you do it in the relationship and context of having the wisdom of the elders present and having those learnings come forward, because we cannot move forward when we're not bringing everyone with us. And I feel like we're in this place of suspended pain where hopelessness is taking the lead, because we're so discombobulated by the pain and anger and the happenings that we're focusing on the wrong things.
Right.
You ask me, we should have a state of emergency because poverty is a public health crisis, but no one is talking about that. Racism is a public health crisis. No one is talking about that. You know, the fact that we have so much social and emotional deprivation, and the church literally is called to be the conduit for that very thing, we're overworked and too busy claiming social political spaces and who's in charge. Too many chiefs, not enough servant leaders. That's my humble opinion. And so if we're really going to do this work together collectively, we've got to really understand what it really means to be sacred. Sacred conversations start in the heart and the root of being dispossessed and disinherited. There is some sacredness there. And because we are so busy trying to make things religious, Christ, as a Christian, didn't call me to religion. Christ called me to be in a space of wholeness so that healing can be created and then nurtured and sustained. And we keep talking sustainability where the entire space is dispossessed. So again, my question around housing and homelessness, what do we mean when we say home? Who's at home?
Yeah.
Right? Who's at home?
Yeah.
And so I want us to really think about, as a church collectively, what do we see ourselves doing that's going to breathe fresh breath? This is a valley of dry bones kind of moment.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who aren't familiar with church and context, this valley of dry bones is where there's a lot of death.
Mm-hmm.
There is literally no life force in the space, but there is spirit all around us. And that one prophet Ezekiel is being shown by God this deprivation and death, and saying, can that thing live? And the question for us is, can the Black community rise? And my answer is yes. It is the how, the collective how, because you have a gaze and you have researchers who keep trying to tell our story or assert themselves into what is happening in our community, and that is not needed. And what I want to say to Black America, Black church, Black organizers, educators, filmmakers, philanthropists, economists, we need to have some conversations that are not televised. And we need to do some really rich work within our communities for us so that we can really create spaces to nurture our young people, because they are hopeless. When you don't expect to live past 20, it doesn't matter what you do. And that's what we're seeing. So the homicide rate is high, but it's telling a story, Sister Cheryl. The story that it's telling is what's hurting and paralyzing us, because nobody really wants to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And we've got to talk about it. Music is life.
Yeah.
The very things our ancestors did to cultivate, to strengthen us forward, we've rejected, or we've amplified this perversion. And nobody is saying anything about the perversion that's being pumped into the minds and hearts of our children. It's called programming. So our educators, you all know what's happening, but the public school will not allow us to do it. It never has. So why do we keep trying to take that route? We don't need the public schools to educate our babies. So we need to go back to the basics. And we really need to think about, what do we mean when we say education? Because we need to speak to their mind and their hearts. We need to talk about the cultural phenomenons that are captivating them and holding them hostage. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were living in the same spaces, having the same conversation, radically different. Mm-hmm. And when King wrote Why We Can't Wait, they kept saying, wait. Wait for what? We can't wait. And that's still relevant today. So for me, we need all of our leaders. You two Harrisons sacrificed everything. That would be an interesting panel. Everything to keep your babies at home, everything to keep your kids at home. You sacrifice to educate them, not just academically. That's secondary. So when you talk about sacrifice, what did our elders give up so that we could read? How many people lost their lives so that we could be in the institution? How many people went without so that the churches could be open and organizers could come in and they could have a space to plan? Who gave up something so that our filmmakers could have a space, because they still not funded correctly, so that they can tell our stories? So we need to do some collective building. We need to really consolidate our spending power. We need to really, really build strong networks so that mentoring is not an idea out there. Mm-hmm. So that when these spaces are opening up, that there is literally a channel for reaching, not just saying accessible. Yeah, it's right there, but I can't get in the door, right? So this affirmative action, all these things are not new. And they're really not barriers. Our barriers right now is us.
Yeah.
It's us and using the resources we have. I'll yield. I see you.
You know, I mean, I'm so excited to, pardon me for like jumping in, but there's, as a filmmaker, the place that I'm at right now, when I make a film, like I'm in the same room, usually in my pajamas, figuring out what it is I need to say, right? And I don't worry about how it's going to hit. But the thing is, and I know that there's a, and I'm connected to a lot of younger filmmakers. The thing is, even though there's opportunity, where do you see those films? Once we've made them, once we've spent years making it, our guts are turning because we don't know how to do the next step and all of that, there's no place to show them. So we make these films to tell these stories, and then they're off, and they have to wait for someone like you to open up a church, or that should not be happening in 2024. That's one thing. The other thing I really want to say, earlier you were talking about, well, what is home? When I started making this film about homelessness, I really did, Erica and her two daughters that are in the film are, I bumped into Erica in one of the nonprofits that I worked, and I've tried my best to do whatever it is I can do to say, girl, you are not alone. You and these babies are not alone. When I started making this film, I would say to the kids, you know, I'm making a film about homelessness, and they didn't correct me, but they would say in no uncertain terms, houselessness. And at one point I heard it and I said, uh-oh, I'm being schooled. And it was such a sweet way they did it. They just kind of, every time we were talking about homelessness, they were saying houselessness because they had each other. So where is home? You know, home is, it's so cliche. Home is where the heart is. Sometimes it's in a structure. Even Wade Noble says that in that film, in life, but for me in that film, that it is this communal notion of we make it because, you know, I am you. There's, you know, there's Ubuntu, there's all of that stuff. I am because you are, all of that stuff that maybe we didn't name it before, but we felt it. So we were actually better off in segregation, where we had to provide for ourselves. There wasn't this kind of homelessness then, because I had an apartment someplace or you had a job someplace. People had to take care of each other. Otherwise we'd tumble through it. So, you know, all of that stuff. But it's really refreshing to hear you speaking, Reverend, because that's almost, it is a new framing. I think someone has always presented that framing, but we need to be reminded in this moment that all of our spaces are sacred and they have to be public. We don't have public space anymore. We don't have civic engagement anymore. We need, this notion of community is almost as sideline as any other thing. We have to develop community again.
Wow.
And it's doable. It's doable.
Yes. Yes.
The one other thing that you asked me that I wanted to, you know, maybe this is you asked me about legislation coming down the pike around homelessness. And I have to say that whole little project, suitcase screenings, I had visioned running around any place and every place with that film to talk about this $20 billion bill that was coming up in 2024. And the organizers for that have since decided that they didn't want to put it on the ballot because although they had 55% polling, 55% approval of it, our California Constitution required 75%. So that, it broke my heart, because that was almost, and you know, some people would say to me, yeah, but then they'd have to actually spend it and build the housing. And I said, yeah, but you know, if you don't have the $20 billion, we don't even get there. So we have to start believing and pass it, and then hold them all accountable, make them build it where it's most needed. And we all know that it's most needed in Oakland, because that's where the biggest population of folks without housing is living right now. But there's this second bill that I think that we have to really consider, which is, I think it's Proposition 5. And that moves that benchmark from 75% to 55%. And it is regulated to affordable housing, other infrastructure things. It's not one of the sexy bills that people know it relates to us, but it's a bill that has so much impact. Because again, if you go back to Howard Jarvis and Proposition 13, that's where all the money got frozen. And your ability to vote it in also got frozen. I think this this tying 75%, it's all part of the same group who feel like it's okay for me to get mine, but y'all can't get yours.
Mm-hmm.
We have to repeal that. We have to repeal Costa-Hawkins. We've got to be able to build multi unit buildings. You know, California's kind of had a moratorium on that. So I think there's a lot of legislation that we've got to pay attention to that doesn't have our names attached to it. It has implications attached to it. And that's kind of meaning that we should really figure out how to launch some civic engagement classes. Like, what does all this stuff mean? And in a way, you know, the Costa-Hawkins, the people who are against that, the way that they talk about this bill, it is, let me say, extreme rent control, anti-housing activists are again planning statewide initiative to take down Costa-Hawkins. If I were just reading that without some background, I would think whoever's putting that up are anti-housing people, and those of us protecting it. In fact, I used to have confusion about what did that mean? What was Costa-Hawkins? I can see why, because you've got it being languaged in this coded way that convinces me that that's not the thing I want, because I'm looking for something that says support affordable housing. We need to do some nuanced review of the people and the things that are on this ballot, because it's going to probably affect us for the next 10, 15 years. I wish I could talk about the 20 billion and all of that. It's not as glorious, but it is necessary.
Absolutely. And it gives us something, the League of Women Voters and some of the things we're doing here at St. Mark's. I will lift this up tomorrow. We know for the first time in the city of Oakland, 16-year-olds will be able to vote.
Yeah.
It's going to be important for us to help our young people understand why voting even matters.
Yeah.
Because the powers that be have helped, and true for a lot of millennials too, believe that voting is wasteless. It's useless. It's a waste of time. Don't do it. And we've got to equip and educate, and that starts with information. Like, what difference does it make is really what they're asking. And so I think it would be great. I will definitely share this and move it forward. It's a starting point, and it just means for the next election we can possibly get that 20 billion on the ballot, and
Yeah.
we will have the numbers to do it and understand it. So thank you for sharing that.
So, go ahead. I was just about to ask Chris. You look like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I have a question for Cheryl. Cheryl, when you mentioned SNCC, I had to think back my first semester when I went to Morehouse.
Huh?
I went over to Clark Atlanta University to hear Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, speak in the auditorium. And I had watched a lot of Eyes on the Prize videos. My mama used to make me watch them, aired on PBS before I would go out with my friends on a Saturday morning. She made me sit down and I thought it was just one video, but I realized it was for the whole day. But I digress. I remember hearing Kwame Ture speak, and he would speak with that finger and his inflection of his voice, and we were fired up. To this day, I modeled my speech. See, I'm doing it now. I modeled intentionally the way I speak, partially after how I saw him speak to us that day. Mm-hmm. So now let me get to my question. Can you share one thing you carry with you from your days with SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee? Share one thing you carry with you from your days with SNCC in your work today.
That's for me, that's a really interesting question, because mind you, I had a mother that put me in a car 2 weeks after I graduated from high school with a stranger and off to Nashville to do something like join SNCC. And I was like a bubblehead, right? The thing that I really remember, because I also was fortunate, my mother was a writer, and they were very activist people, not like activists. I couldn't put they were activist people. Anyway, the thing that I really got most was that all of these folks, number one, are ordinary people. They're not superheroes. As someone who, as a young age, would watch, because Stokely Carmichael would come through Nashville. So, and we would go see Amir Baraka, in his freedoms. And some of those folks that I met and knew, I can't even remember. Being at Fisk, like our teachers were John Killens, like Robert Hayden, David Driscoll. And you didn't even know that there was something special until I have a friend who's an artist, and she says, how did I go to school where David Driscoll was the teacher? I didn't even take a class. Now she's struggling at 70 to be an artist. But anyway, the fact that they're human beings, they're regular people, says to me that they're not doing something that you couldn't do, right? Mm-hmm. Right? There's if you're an orator, you're an orator, and what are the things that make good orators? And certainly as we watch this election, we see some good orators, mm-hmm. and we see some not so good orators. Right. But there's levels to it. We can all access it depending on who you are. I'm someone who likes to be in my pajamas, working on the computer, making like these films and making these statements. But that gives me the courage to do this part that I do. I wouldn't trade, as crazy as my background is, and Lord knows I'm not going into that. I wouldn't trade a minute of it, because it was rich, and it was, it was so rich and lively that as an older woman, I can not be that active and know that I will continue to contribute in a lesser way, but I'll continue to contribute because that's the only thing I know how to do, right? Anyway, so that business about these people that we all revere, they're just people who are making decisions like we're making decisions.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. You're the first person I've ever been able to have, I'm getting a little emotional, a personal conversation about my exposure to Stokely Carmichael before he went on to glory. And so this is I just want to tell you, having you here is so invaluable.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Some of that is you and Morehouse. I mean, I really do find that there's a connection. Like when I started naming all those people who, that's a unique experience. I don't know how we can duplicate that. I think that's part of what's wrong with public schools. When I was a kid, my mother taught in public schools. There were Black, unfortunately, not so much for me. I only had one Black teacher, but right after that, they started getting credentialed. But you know, the state of California shut that down. So now we get kind of lame brain young white girls teaching our kids that don't have that depth. Southern schools were better schools, not because they had great books and great facilities, but because they had teachers
Say it, Cheryl. Say it.
who knew the course and drove the course. Like they didn't give up on you. And, you know, at Fisk, I'm telling you, I wish I could tell you how lame brain I was, but they didn't give up on me.
Yes.
So a girl who's still working on, okay, they, she, or whatever, and I'm dealing with this intergenerational thing, Fisk didn't give up on me.
Right. Yep.
A level of knowing and investment.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing. Teachers who did speak into your lives.
Yeah.
And that's true for the church, it's true for community. We grew up in East Oakland. Brookfield Village is our home, right? That's home when I think of heart and connection. But parents knew each other, neighbors knew each other. And we certainly got threatened. People can say warned, but I'm a tell on you was a threat and a promise that was delivered, and it meant something, right? People could stop and say, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
Or I can see you doing that, and you better than that. Don't do, you know, what are you doing? And really, really pour into you. Whereas the public schools don't offer that so much. And that's why freedom schools were so successful. You know, when you had the one classroom model, when you had folks who showed up on Saturdays and really poured in, when the weekdays, you know, we start calling it VBS, Vacation Bible School. But Vacation Bible School wasn't about necessarily books. It was about learning and knowing. It was your God lessons and your life lessons, and the two weren't always separate. And so it's the whole idea of education authentically, the whole person. You know, California's been saying for over 20 years that we've adopted this whole educate the whole child model. I have yet to see it, because we still, any inner city USA, educators are not really afforded the opportunity to fully engage their text. They're doing behavior modification, and they're not equipped to do behavior modification. So then you will spend hours and hours with educators talking about who ought to be in the classroom. You know, and special education has become harmful on so many levels in ways that it was not ever meant to be. It is such a blessing for those who really can benefit. But when you take a behavior and you set it aside rather than address what you're saying, research shows Black boys learn best when they're moving, right? We're not going to even talk about Montessori because we can't afford Montessori education,
Right.
But experiential learning is a huge part of education, right? And so can they still move around? Who has time for it in the educational space where that is not acceptable, and where life learning lessons are being removed from the space, and what's being pushed is really this limited amount of information that's getting them ready for what, I'm not sure what. But it certainly is not preparing them for the fullness of education, not even in the academy. We're still focused on standardized tests when we know research shows that standardized tests doesn't tell us anything about your ability to leave the academy and really perform in the workplace. And so what we can do, you know, as organizers and educators and filmmakers and clergy folks is really push the institution to honor what it knows by its own evidence-based practices, which is stop using the grandfather clause to kick our kids out and to lock our people out. And let's start educating holistically, and meaning the institutions are held to the same standards that we know are actually reflective of real life. And if the institutional church, if our parents who may be grandparents, maybe neighbors, maybe community folks have raised your children, you're done, you're through with it, just know this. If you are not pouring into children who don't have parents and haven't ever had them, they're diamonds in the rough. I know folks don't like that term. They're not polished. They're the folks that you don't want to see coming. if you don't take time to pour into them, they're not going to only look like a nightmare, they're going to become a nightmare. And that's what we're seeing. Communities that are afraid of our own children and grandchildren. Well, who raised them? Because foster care is full of kids that most folks don't want to be bothered with. And so if we're not opening up our homes, we're not opening up our hearts, if we're not making time to volunteer, to show up, to pour into, what do we expect to see in the next 5 10 years in our community? We have a problem that's solvable if we take the whole person approach to reviving life into our community, including our young people, and honoring our elders and welcoming them back. Dr. Harrison, you uplift Stokely Carmichael Black liberation, and that idea is right now needed as much as it was in the 60s. And what does it mean to be free thinker? What does it mean to live fully into who you are unapologetically? I am unapologetically Black. I miss hearing my big mama talk about children. So when you were talking about South, Cheryl, her and her friends talked about how the children were doing. And that warms my heart because that is almost extinct now, right? So not a whole lot of big mamas, nanas, Madeers, those are gone for the most part. Or age.
I'm Nana.
Nana, all right, right. And so having those voices saying no, because what we learn from is what we live. And if no one is speaking that life into us, I remember my grandmother said to me when I came back from college and I was at San Francisco State, don't come in here being an educated fool. Now you got to understand what that means. And she helped me to think about the importance of valuing all of my life experience, not just what I was learning in the academy, because the academy was teaching me to think a certain way in relationship to the text, not so much in my lived experience, because a lot of that, there was pushback there. And so I invite us to really think about how we can connect, interconnect, not just in project, but holistically and ongoing. And what do we need to establish so that our communities, including those who are not in the space, how do we equip us and others that are uncomfortable with those raw voices that are unapologetic, Cheryl, about what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. And we've got to open that space for them because we close them out a lot because we don't like how they say it. And when talking about police accountability, and I've said this over the years in those spaces where, blue culture is a culture and we don't fully understand blue culture, but it is a whole culture. And they're held to a standard on books and off the books, on record and off the record, just like the rest of us are in certain political or professional spaces. And we very seldomly invite retired or ousted police to join those conversations. But what we do is open up church doors to invite the conversation, and then we try to suppress it or silence pain by saying, stop yelling, stop raising your voice, stop being aggressive. You're making people uncomfortable. Well, you ought to be uncomfortable about the level of bloodshed in the streets. Stop crying when they're grieving and lamenting their children being slaughtered. Don't do that. But we haven't found comfortable ways of saying, let's practice cultural humility. That means blue folks, you're going to be uncomfortable. And even though you may not be the person, you're part of the institution that's responsible for hundreds of years of institutional racism and abuse. So be uncomfortable representing that space, even though you may have multiple identities in this room. Right now, you got the blue suit on, wear it and understand it. Parents whose children have killed people, if you're in the space, it's going to be painful because you too are a part of that. Even though you didn't pull the trigger and we honor and love you, but you're going to be uncomfortable because we don't talk about some stuff. Parents who have had children murdered, we're going to show up in a different way, and we ought to be able to be in the space in our pain and our anger and our outrage, also with hopeful expectation that this space is going to go somewhere. And conveners have to be able to do both and, without yielding to discomfort and dispossessing people who don't always have a voice because it's politically incorrect. So we need some politically incorrect spaces. I'm willing to be there. I need us to be there. in order for us to move forward in what we hope to accomplish. And I know it's possible if we will do the hard work.
You know, I want to say two things. One is my granddaughter is in college, and I got really excited when she said, Nana, do you have the 1619 project? I said, I got it. She said, well, I'm taking a class. And okay, so I gave her the book. She said, oh, the teacher wants us to watch it on television. So she came over to my house. We watched it. She was in tears. She said, Nana, I didn't know any of that stuff. That's, and my granddaughter, her mother is active in political. I'm active in political. That was all kind of, I said, don't worry about it. We'll watch this thing together and we'll talk through it. That's one thing. But the other thing I wanted to say out loud, and most people they don't get this. Most of those kids that you're talking about, I meet them a lot because they're kids like I was. They're kids, I can spot a kid who needs to be a writer, needs to be a filmmaker or a sound engineer. They're left of, I don't mean left politically, maybe I do, I don't know, but they're just not centered. And you can tell, and I've had friends say, will you come to lunch with me and my kid? Because I don't know what to do with her. One young lady, I said, well, she's a writer. That's because you're trying to make her whatever it is that she is. But no, this kid is a writer. She flowered, the child flowered, and because she was a writer. But those aren't thinking, there's something about us where we don't understand that my call to making a film is as core and intrinsic as maybe your call to be a minister or your call to get a PhD and work in the academy. I don't have a choice about this stuff. I have run away from it more than times I can count because it's some hard stuff. I don't have any money. And this is a high money field, but I've got to do it because that's the thing that has shown up as my core. And I see it especially in boys. Why would we make him sit down when what he needs to do is run around the block? Give him something to do that runs him around the block. Anyway, and some of that, the holistic approach that they talk about in California schools is a Bush function and so off point. It's like, oh, come on. Yeah, and the thing that I don't do is test. So if the whole thing is based on testing, I'm going to flunk out. That's guaranteed. I don't pass tests. There's a lot of kids like that. Anyway, just wanted to push that in.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, and honestly, we could have talked probably for a good 4 to 5 hours. I have this is sort of a final thought, and then Dr. Harrison, I've been saying Chris, but I need to honor the hard work he put in. Dr. Harrison is going to close us out. Reverend Davis Wiles, and this is a challenge for you because I'm getting ready to ask you to respond to this in 2 minutes or less, and I know that you can write a whole dissertation on this. What would you say to the person that does not believe that social justice is the church's responsibility? That's for the pastor, for the members who sit in the pews. I have actually heard or overheard someone say that. When we know that it's biblical, we can find scriptures, we can point to scriptures where it is our responsibility and God is concerned about the marginalized. So I'm going to be quiet. And what would you say? What would you say?
I would say, understand the Great Commission. Understand when Jesus sent them out by twos, Jesus sent them out with instructions for healing. for educating, for equipping, for nurturing, for walking with. Jesus's main concern and main message was, in order to be effective, first know me and then go tell somebody. Once you tell them whatever their ailment is, help them get healed. Once they get healed, go connect somebody so they can be healed. He said, understand that nothing you are going through is new. The thing of it is that there's an opportunity. It's called salvation. Put judgment aside. You're not equipped to judge anybody other than you. You can judge behavior that is harmful, but anything else, and that was in a social climate where the Roman Empire, this is social political, was in power and in control, and they were enforcing their way of life. One of the things Jesus said to them very clearly when asked about paying taxes, for instance, if we need an example, is it lawful for believers to pay taxes? And Jesus' simple response was, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's. Translation, whatever social political responsibility you have, do that as a good citizens of the earth. And the second part of that is give to God what is God's. There isn't an either or. Your social witness, Jesus in the social gospel, is the only message Jesus ever lived. And so to understand why we need to be in the world, and I'll sum us up with this, sometimes the only Bible people will ever see, hear, or read will be your life. And so if you are a living testament of the good news of Jesus Christ, remember you are called to good news. You're called to love, which is a justice answer. And Paul said it this way, faith without works is dead. And if you don't know what that means, go to 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show yourself approved, a work person that needed not to be ashamed, rightly divide the word of truth. Your word of truth is God is love and Jesus was justice. That was the example. And we're only to follow him and be an imitation of that love and justice in the world. I'm done.
Cheryl, 2 minutes or less. Any final thoughts? Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, first of all, I guess my final thought is we need more of these. We need to get in the habit of listening in a way that we're absorbing what other people say. So that's number one. I do appreciate it. I appreciate being in environments where I'm learning. And the one thing that I do understand is that this world requires you to be a lifelong learner. You have to always be open to, because it's always changing around you. So I've never been able to put my finger on the pulse, because that pulse is always changing. At the same time, it's also in a cycle. And so I kind of appreciate that. I don't think so. I mean, I think that we've already said we need to get back to community. We need to get back to community. You know, I'm in a world, because I do operate in sort of a political environment where a lot of times people are pushing nationalism, pushing like, okay, I can relate to that. I can relate to faith. I can relate to lots of stuff. And I don't want to eliminate any of it. I don't want to have to show up in a particular way. I want to show up in my own authentic way. Not that it's better or grander or whatever, but that's what I want. That's what I want from you. And that's what I want to deliver. I want some authenticity in this, because frankly, I don't know how you track it if we're not being that, right? Collectively, we can track it, because you might be able to read cues I can't read, and vice versa. So, you know, it is a communal understanding of what we're going through. The one last thing that I think I would say is my heart goes out to places like Oakland, who have gone through what's been happening here since like the 70s. Crack cocaine, guns being intentionally, and no one talks about the fact all that stuff came from Sam Leandro. They know the store. They know exactly what has happened. And we're sitting here with mothers who are in tears and all of that stuff. You know, I have one of those kids, but the grace of God, he's not as in the street as I was so afraid he would be. But I certainly relate to and have met so many women who've lost their children. And all of that stuff is intentional because those people who could have stopped it turned the other way. And I look around and yeah, you say, well, sweetie, tell me about your background. Well, my mother was a crackhead and my daddy left us, or, you know, whatever the story is, those stories are abundant. And when you see kids who survive that, like, geez, well, Jesus Christ, you know, that's really, I think that there's the amount of success that we've had given the circumstances is phenomenal. And so there's something to be optimistic for, but I never want to witness another generation having to go through the stuff that this past, I'd say 3 generations have gone through, raising themselves without even a community to support them, without, you know, any of that stuff. So my hat goes off to those who've been able to succeed and survive this. It has been inhumane. That's me.
All right, all right. Well, I'm preparing to close us out. So, what have we heard from Cheryl Fabio, Rowena Brown, Reverend Quintisha Davis Wiles, and Dominique Ware today? That's a rhetorical question. I do want to acknowledge that we appreciate Rowena Brown stopping by today. She is running for at-large Oakland City Council. We also want to thank Dominique Ware for stopping by with us earlier today. He is running for Oakland Unified School District School Board, District 7. He had to leave early. He's doing some canvassing in the community, but we thank the two of them for joining us today. So let me get back to that question, the rhetorical question. First, the power of community. Although one of our immediate priorities is transitional housing, a more sustainable goal is addressing root causes to improve the quality of life for all. It is important for the church to clarify the role of the church, and the Black church in particular, as it relates to civic engagement, community development and partnership, the function of the family, and K-12 education in this 21st century. The Black church was historically a place to galvanize community empowerment and holistic conversations during the civil rights movement. The Black church can be the bedrock of our community once again. To counter the pervasive state of homelessness among our beloved community, honest intergenerational discussions like this about the pain and disappointment is a great starting point for addressing social, psychological, and emotional challenges in our community. Now turning to education. Parental and community advocacy is key to helping our children excel academically while simultaneously shielding them from some of the challenges and difficulties of receiving a public education in an inner city such as Oakland. So what role should organized public and private education play in the lives of our children? What sacrifices are necessary to ensure that our children receive an education that propels them to thrive and perpetuate the positive cultural posterity of our future generations in our community? We need to hold our educational institutions accountable to use evidence and research-based practices to deliver what works for our children. And we can learn so much from our elders and ancestors about how to cultivate courageous speech and expression on behalf of our families, children, and community citizens. With respect to housing, we have to recover from the unintended consequences of decades-old legislation that have resulted in adverse consequences from some city dwellers. Promoting civic responsibility is one of the ways to do this. So what do we mean when we say home? How do we define home beyond the physical building of sleeping, eating, and drinking, literally? And now in employment and economic outcomes, we must resist the tendency to assume that people who are homeless and unemployed do not have goals, dreams, and hope. With this understanding, we can explore ways to work collectively, to leverage our resources, contacts, and connections to support them and open doors for them. Lastly, filmmaking can play a role in addressing housing, employment, and economic challenges in our communities, but we need to think creatively about how to distribute our beloved community-centered films to the broader community. As I close, I want to thank my wife, Dr. NNeka Allen-Harrison, for organizing this most needed community conversation and hosting it today, titled Oakland at the Crossroads, Housing, Education, and the Power of Local Voting. So I leave you with this charge to those who are watching this video. This was an amazing intergenerational conversation today, and we thank everyone who participated. So here's the charge. Let us go forth to empower our community by championing equitable housing, fostering transformative education, harnessing the collective strength of our communities, and driving the realization of economic opportunities to forge a path to a brighter and more just future for all. And get this, in the words of the late mentor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Howard Thurman, he once stated, and I quote, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." Thank you again. And this concludes our community conversation.